Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. A few weeks ago, we took a first look at the Walther PDP and how its optics mounting system has been revised by Walther after receiving some feedback from owners about the possible flaws in its design. Today, we're going to go ahead and mount an optic on the PDP and talk about some other steps or considerations you should think about when mounting an optic, especially if it's your first time. First though, I wanted to do a quick overview or recap of how this second gen PDP optic mounting is different from the first generation. Originally, Walther designed the PDP with an optic system that had the bottom of the mounting plate as well as this pocket for the slide both completely smooth, so that the only interface between them was the screws that held the optic mounting system in place. This resulted in all the force of the slide reciprocating being borne by those optic mounting screws, which are not the best at bearing a shearing force. Some owners had these screws break or fail and subsequently had their optic detached from the slide, which obviously is suboptimal. Walther has subsequently redesigned the optic mounting system for the PDP, and it has incorporated sections in the slide and on the optic mounting plate that interface together and take the stress off the mounting screws. Most notable is this large center spine that runs down the middle of the slide pocket and the corresponding slot in the optic plate, as well as the locating lugs here on the slide and the plate as well. Together, these mitigate the side-to-side forces as well as the fore and aft forces that are exerted on the mounting system, and they allow the screws to just secure the plate to the slide like they're supposed to. Mounting an optic starts with making sure that you have the right plate for your optic. Optics have different footprints, and each mounting plate is footprint specific. Most optics will tell you which footprint they have, either somewhere on the packaging or through some quick searching online. It's critical that the optic plate matches footprint or the optic will never mount properly. Now, it is worth it to note that plates do not ship with the PDP, and new owners will need to fill out a form on Walther's website in order to request a plate that matches their optic. I requested this plate on a Friday and took about 5 business days to land in my mailbox. The optic that I'm using today is the Swamp Fox Justice, which has an RMR footprint, and we're also going to be mounting the accessory Ironside shield that goes over the optic. I picked both of these guys up from Brownells. So in a nutshell, mounting the optic to the slide is relatively simple. We're going to put the plate on the slide, and then we're going to put the optic to the plate. However, there are a couple considerations that you should think of before you start doing this. Number one, always make sure your weapon is unloaded when you work on it, safety first. Number two, always check to see if the plate needs to be mounted to the slide first before you screw the optic to it. It's super easy to get really excited and, go ahead and mount up your optic to the plate and then realize, just like here, that there is no way to access the mounting screws that actually secure the plate to the slide once the optic is mounted. So you're gonna have to end up taking it off again anyway. Number three, verify which screws you need to use to mount the plate to the slide and the optic to the plate. These may differ depending on the optic that you're running. I am going to be using the factory Walther screws to secure the plate to the slide and the screws provided with the Justice to mount the optic to the plate. Number four, have some blue thread locker or Loctite on hand to help secure those screws. These parts are riding the slide and the slide cycles very violently, and the screws could easily come loose without the added assistance of a thread locker. You won't be seeing me use a thread locker here because I'm just kind of demoing the assembly, but definitely use it when you assemble your optic and slide. Number five, or 4B, I guess you could call it. On a related note, don't use red or high temp thread locker. That stuff is a lot stronger than the regular blue stuff, and it needs to be heated to remove and can be a real pain to undo. This is going to be very important for you if you need to unmount your optic in order to change the battery, because you're going to have a really bad time. Number six, do not crank down as hard as you can on these mounting screws. If you go crazy and crank down on these, you can damage them or strip them out, or at the very least make your life very difficult if and when you need to remove this optic. Always follow the recommended torque specs for your optic and for your firearm. I'm going to be torquing the screws that hold the plate to the slide to 18 inch-pounds as noted in the PDP owner's manual, and I'll be torquing the screws that hold the optic to the plate to 15 inch-pounds as it says in the Justice owner's manual. And last but not least, number seven, it can be very helpful to make some small witness marks on the screws with a paint marker when you're done, so you have an easy at-a-glance reference to make sure the screws are still snug. Now, YouTube doesn't like showing firearms being modified, so I'm going to mount this up off camera, but I'm going to go over what I'm going to do step by step just so you see it. We're going to take the slide, and we're going to take the slide plate that I got, put it on the slide, and then we're going to take these screws and put them in here and torque them down to 18 inch-pounds as noted in the PDP owner's manual. After that, we are going to take the Swamp Fox Justice optic, slide it into the Ironside shield, place that onto the optic plate, and then here you see the holes. We're going to use these screws there to mount the optic to the plate and torque those down to 15 inch-pounds as shown in the Swamp Fox owner's manual. Okay, all done. Everything is mounted up and torqued down. All we need to do now is drop our barrel back in place and our recoil spring back in place. And we're just going to drop this back onto the weapon and we are good to go. Now, after everything is mounted and torqued down, don't forget to go and zero the optic. It's not going to be perfectly lined up straight out of the box, no matter what anyone tells you. Take it to a range and zero it according to the manufacturer's instructions. It'll give you a chance to get some trigger time in and practice with the optic, which is never a bad thing. If this is your first pistol-mounted optic, take the time to get used to presenting the gun so that the dot appears in your field of view. That's something that I definitely had to get used to and a lot of people find challenging, and this is a great time to practice. So that's all I've got for you this time, but we do have videos coming up on the Taurus 856 mods and the first impressions of the Taurus G3, as well as an introduction / continuation of the Home Defense PCC build. So if you are not subscribed or you don't have that bell rung, I highly suggest you do that. If you're interested in the PDP or the Swamp Fox Justice or the Ironside Shield, you can pick all of those up at Brownells. I will drop links in the description below. Don't forget to check out the Practical Tactical blog. I will drop a link to that below as well. It's got a lot more practical information that I think you're going to find useful. Again, that's all I've got for you this time, so until next time, stay safe.